goes the Oresteia. Yeah. So, but the different groundwork for these tragic plays, I think, came from a number of sources. They certainly, I think, evolved out of the Dionysian rituals, out of these choruses. The choruses praise to Dionysus that was sung on the hillsides of the Acropolis, in the Agora, before the theater was built. The theater, again, was built after the victory of the Greeks over the Persians. And that's an interesting date. 460 BCE becomes a really interesting kind of connected date. A lot of scholars have like an argument about when Euripides was actually born. He was born on Salamis, the island in the harbor outside Athens, where where the Persian fleet was surrounding. We're all in. If you look at the map of Greece, it's a little sort of like isthmus. There's an island, and then there's the mainland, and then where all the ships were starting to come in, and then there was a storm, and a lot of those ships was destroyed, and then the Greek navy, very much like the Spanish Armada and the British, and how when the Spanish Armada went down, England rose to power. When the Persian fleet went down, Athens, Greece, especially Athens, rose to power. So 460 becomes this year that becomes very, very significant because Aeschylus is there fighting. He fought at the Battle of Marathon. That's one of the things on his tombstone. It says nothing about him being a playwright. It says something about him being a general. He came from a wealthy family. He was born in Eleusis, which is this kind of holy place. He presumably participated in the Eleusinian mysteries, and the Eleusinian mysteries are connected to the older matriarchal religion. So it's really interesting if you look at Aeschylus's background, that he was kind of surrounded by this because that's connected to the Furies, so his kind of what he grew up with is going to inform how he writes these ancient vengeful goddesses, because that was part of the mysteries still attached to it, that men really weren't supposed to participate in, but a few special people were able to, and he was one of them. So it's really interesting in terms of like how the time, personal background, and what's happening in the move forward of the evolution of theater is reflected in the work that we have left of these authors. So, and Sophocles, so 460, so he's fighting in that battle at Salamis too. He's fighting in that battle. When the Greeks win, there is a victory chorus. And 16-year-old Sophocles sings in that victory chorus. Because remember, the chorus is made up of the sons of like the high, it's like a big honor if you're it's like a senator, right? If you're a senator's son, you're in the Greek chorus. It's a duty and it's an honor to participate in these plays. It's a civic duty, it's a religious duty. So it's really woven into the fabric of the culture. So, and this is probably, still in the Agora, that space, that big space that's also at the base of the Acropolis. You have the Senate, you have the Parthenon, you have the theater that's built in a couple of years, and then you have the Agora, that whole big space where everything happened, the marketplace, the town hall, the religious festivals. My whole theory about agoraphobia, what agoraphobia is, not maybe so much fear of crowds and fear of going outside, but fear of participation in that community ritual and talk and the building of a nation, the core of democracy and the core of theater. This is what the time that we're talking, it's the basis of Western civilization. It's very much the basis of things, and it's still in this country. So 460. And then scholars love to say there's a big debate about whether Euripides was born in 465 BCE or 460. And scholars, because they love this, like everything to be kind of neat, love the idea that he was born the same year that all this happened. So the three authors are connected. Aeschylus is fighting, then Sophocles sings in the victory chorus, and meanwhile, little baby Euripides is being born on Salamis, which he's going to stay in quite a bit. He's going to write, he has a cave. He gets married twice, but his wife nag him, and he's like, he kind of goes and he writes in this cave. And about 20, maybe 15, 20 years ago, they think that they excavated the cave he was actually in. They found some little bit of shard of something that some arts debated, but some archaeologists, say, yes, this was the cave that Euripides went and wrote in to get away from his nagging, promiscuous, cuckolding wife. So a lot of the thing about Euripides had this reputation of being misogynist, right? Because Aristophanes is going to write plays about it. He's going to end up in Aristophanes' plays. And Aristophanes is going to make fun of him. He's going to make fun of him in The Frogs, which he writes about, the big debate about, like, who's going to get the poet's chair, is going to then come back to Athens because they need a great poet, and there's no great poets, so so Hercules goes to the underworld to try to figure out whether Aeschylus or Euripides is the one who should come back up to land, to be a play. We need a great playwright. And so there's a debate, and they wave verses, and they have a big fight. And it's sort of like this dramaturgical, critical debate about the quality of the writing. And when we get to comedy, we'll talk about why this was happening rather than the kind of very blatant political criticism of the leadership and war and philosophers like Socrates. It started to get a little safer subject because at this point Euripides is dead. So he's also presented as a misogynist in Congresswomen, where he kind of dresses up and invades this whole group of women who are meeting, who are basically kind of say we want a kind of socialist, society that women are part of. But the thing is, when we get to Aristophanes, we'll really look at what he's doing, even with Lysistrata. Like Aristophanes, if you say Aristophanes, Lysistrata, everyone goes, feminist, right? Not true. Not true. It's a whole thing in terms of how he depicted Euripides as this kind of woman-hater, misogynist thing is really interesting when we really look at how Euripides treats the female characters in his plays. Because a lot of his plays are going to have strong women at the center of his plays. So if you look at the difference of how he presents Medea, as opposed to how Seneca, the Roman writer who's going to basically adapt a lot of the Greek plays, because that's what a lot of Roman culture was. Roman culture basically looked, here we are, we're militaristic and whatever, and now we're conquering Greece and we're enslaving them, but, look, they're kind of got a cool thing, and I like their gods, let's take their gods and rename them, right? Because the Romans renamed the Greek gods, and let's take their culture and their theater and let's play around with that. Let's take their comedies and we'll merge it with our folk comedy and let's look at these tragedies. Now these tragedies that Seneca wrote, were actually probably never performed publicly. They were probably read in the court. They were probably performed by Seneca. Maybe some of the courtiers took parts and read them within the circle while they're having their very fancy dinner and drinking and who knows what else, as the Rome, because we're talking about the age of Nero, and Rome is getting really kind of funky and corrupt and decadent, and we got the 1% and we got the 99%, and it's like, it's about to go, it's about to fall. The barbarians are at the gates. The barbarians, it's a really interesting word. Barbarians, where does that come from? Barbarian, right? It's like, barbarians. We got barbarians now, right? It's kind of, the implication is like, you're like a barbarian, right? It's like a snotty, it's like, it's doctrine of discovery, we're civilized and you're a barbarian, right? It comes from Greece, because the whole thing was that the xenophobia, the Greeks were kind of xenophobic. They were like, we're Greek and we're special, especially the Athenians. And this is what's going to get the Athenians into trouble. Yeah?
What is xenophobic?
Xenophobic means a kind of fear of anyone who's not like you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So anyone who looks different from you, you think you're better and you're afraid of them. You think you're better. There's a lot, we see it all the time, variations of xenophobia. It's a bigotry. It's a bigotry, but it's a bigotry of race, of groups of people, of anyone who is not like you. It's a tribalism, but it becomes like oh, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are, how nice you are. It's like, you are this, you're not us, so we're afraid of you. Still around. Still around. And the Greeks and Athens, with all its wonderful cultural things, was kind of xenophobic. So basically, anyone, it's kind of like going to Paris and speaking French, trying to speak French, you know? They were kind of like that. Like if you ever been to Paris and the Parisians, it's like, oh, you didn't say aiguille, you know, you said aiguille, you know, so it's like, but it was like anyone who didn't speak Greek spoke barbar, right? Literally barbar. They spoke barbar. And that was like, oh, you know, you don't speak Greek, you speak barbar, barbarian. What was that?
Like gibberish or like...
No, it's like barbar. It's like, yeah, well, it sounds like gibberish to us because it's not Greek, right? So it's barbar, so barbarians. So going back again to these roots, I think the roots of that both Aeschylus and Sophocles give their hat to Homer and to epic poetry. And the fact that epic poetry was often about the hero journey, right, which we talked about. We talked about these two strains. Ritual, Dionysian rituals connected to a lot of the other rituals around the world. They're very similar aspects. The Dionysian tearing apart the pathos, because Dionysus specifically is a god who suffers sparagmos. Again, that's the tearing apart. Sparagmos, with a literal tearing apart in a sacrifice of an animal, turns into the psychological tearing apart that we watch in drama of someone's psychology. So Dionysus is a god that suffers sparagmos, and then he is remembered, literally, his pieces, and he resurrects. So he's a resurrecting god, deity. So that kind of resurrection deity and the pathos and the resurrection becomes a real key in terms of what's going to happen in tragic drama. That's going to merge with the hero journey and epic poetry. So these things kind of all merge together. Does that make sense? And you have the groundwork of these three strains coming together. And then you have someone at the core of the leadership of Athens in 546, which is Pisistratus, who was called a tyrant, but it wasn't because he was a bad king. Again, the word tyrant means he wasn't necessarily in the lineage of the bloodline, who basically sort of set up the idea for these Dionysian festivals, that was going to be a community ritual that was going to bring some kind of cultural stability to Athens. So you have a political motivation, you have a political motivation and a cultural, social motivation to provide some structure to these, more unstructured kind of free-for-all rituals. It's what Euripides is going to write in the Bacchae, which is one of his last plays. He's going to write the Bacchae, Dionysus coming with all his Bacchians, his Maenads, and they do these rituals, that there are these celebrations, that they're celebrating and drinking and lying with animals, and it's this life force, celebration of the earth spirit, of the life force. And in the Bacchae, Pentheus, who is the 19-year-old, same age as Dionysus, these are teenagers. It's really interesting if you look at the Bacchae that these are very young men, both trying to establish their power. And that's a very important factor in the way they behave, because they both kind of behave badly. Who knows the Bacchae at all? Do you know it? I wish we could look at it, too, because it's a wonderful play. And it also deals with this thing that we talked about in Antigone, which is, the difference between physis, P-H-Y-S-I-S, right, which Antigone was saying, the law of nature, the law of the gods, the old, moral code, the law of emotions, too. We're going to see it in Romanticism, the difference between the force of emotion and sexuality and the animal forces in people that are not attached to reason, and the force of reason and logic and order. Friedrich Nietzsche is going to talk about this in a very influential book that he writes called The Birth of Tragedy, which is going to influence a lot of people in the mid-19th century. And The Birth of Tragedy distills down to this idea, the Apollonian and the Dionysian. The Apollonian, about bringing things to order, about elegance, about things having a structure. about not having chaos, fear of chaos, in fact. And the Dionysian, that we need order, we need laws, we need elegant columns, we need people to sit in church and we need Episcopal church. Episcopal church is very Apollonian, it's like you sit and you don't do anything. The Baptist church is much more Dionysian. It's like you respond, there's the Spirit, you get the Spirit, there's all these other things. You're not sitting there, oh, yes, there's something going on. That's more Dionysian. That's a little like an example in terms of Christian religions, how it breaks down. I tend to be at core, I'm like, no, everything needs to be, I'm a little Apollonian, but I'm also really fascinated and love the Dionysian impulse, even though I'm kind of going, I'm at a rave, will I die? I have my nose is a little crooked because I was in a slam, and somebody just slammed right into me. And I was like, oh, look, I think he just broke my nose. So it was like, I wasn't there going, yeah, but I was going there, wow, this is really, really interesting. Ouch. But so the difference between these two things is nomos, logic, order, social order that Pentheus in the Bacchae says, Pentheus, who's just inherited the throne at 19 years old, way too young because his father abdicated, and so, he says, no, Cadmus, his grandfather, is still tottering around, but his father says, I don't want to be king, give it to my son Pentheus. Pentheus isn't ready. Dionysius, also 19 years old, comes from the shores of Asia Minor, the shores of like what's, now Turkey, and Israel, Palestine, all that, the shores of the Mediterranean there, Asia Minor, and those little islands that are off the coast that Athens at one point controlled, the Ionian Greeks had got into, coming down from the north, and had kind of colonized that whole area, bringing their patriarchal god system, incorporating the matriarchal deities of the area into their cosmology, with all the women that Zeus is going to seduce and carry off, including Europa, right, on the bull. He turns himself into a bull. He takes Europa from the shore of Asia Minor, where she's living, takes her first to Crete, and then to the mainland of Greece, thereby giving that whole piece of land the name of Europe. Right. But the whole thing is that Europa was probably a local deity that was then incorporated into the Greek cosmology, so that if you were people who were living there, and you worshipped Europa, then you could make that kind of leap to accepting the deities. The Christians also did it when they went into Great Britain, where it was a Druidic religion, and they would nail the oak was very sacred to the Druids, so they would nail crucifix crosses on the oak. So they would merge those two religions slowly. The other thing, there were midsummer and midwinter burning, like Burning Man. Burning Man's do you know Burning Man? That's a very Druidic kind of connected ritual in terms of you make the big man and then you burn it, and like the Druids would put animals and sometimes criminals in the big man and burn it. That was a midsummer ritual. And in the midwinter, they'd have a big log. And the big log got incorporated into our kind of winter tradition as, what do you think? The Yule log, right, the Yule log, which comes from a Druidic thing, which gets incorporated. So the Greeks did this too, and Dionysus was one of these local gods they couldn't get rid of, so they incorporated Dionysus. Dionysus came out of Zeus's thigh, right? So all these strands are coming together to build the platform for Greek tragedy, for Aeschylus first, and then all the other writers that have not survived, and who knows how well they wrote. We think, that these probably were the best because they got a lot of prizes that we have on record, and because the plays have survived. The whole idea of if you care about something enough to, to make sure it survives, then there's an assumption that it has some value in the culture. So it's really interesting that 18 plays of Euripides survived. Because Euripides, even though he didn't get as many first prizes, he only got 4 and one after he was dead for the Bacchae. He didn't get that many victories, but he was incredibly popular. because Sophocles, Aeschylus, and Aeschylus especially, was considered sort of speaking more to the aristocracy. Sophocles started to speak more to everyone, but people felt Euripides was really speaking to the people and to what people were thinking in Athens at the time. So what Euripides' obsessions really were women, war, and the gods. And he really looked at those. These are three subjects that we've seen pop up in the other Greek writers, but with Euripides, he's really going to focus on those subjects. In terms of the gods, a lot of times the way the choruses praise the gods, especially in Aeschylus, somewhat in Sophocles, they don't really do that in Euripides. If you note even the Medea, there's not like a lot of choral odes in the same way that we've seen the choral odes in Sophocles, and certainly not the length of the choral odes that we've seen in Aeschylus. They're short. They're short, and they're kind of like, I'm going to comment, but yeah, get out of the way, we're doing the scene,
And it's
right?
the leader talking.
And it's the leader talking. That's right. It's the leader. It's not like the great choral ode. So if you look at the difference in Agamemnon, that first long, parados as they come in, as they parade in through the parados, through that, entryway, same name, the long chorus, and then they're saying, "What do you think, great queen?" Basically, and she ignores them, right? She just goes about her own shore, right? Forcing them to go into that first stasimon, the first, choral ode. So it becomes this long choral ode. We don't see any of that in Euripides. Aeschylus is going to shorten the chorus because when Thespis steps out of the chorus, that's all it is. And so he starts to do call and response, and you have the first scene. Aeschylus is credited with then putting in the second actor. Thespis becomes the first actor, Aeschylus puts in the second actor. Sophocles, the young upstart that's going to defeat Aeschylus in 468, and then is going to start winning over Aeschylus. Some people say Aeschylus moved to Sicily because it was like, okay, if I'm not going to win, I'm just going to get out and move to Sicily and, be killed by an eagle dropping a tortoise on his bald head, which is the story of how he died. Thinking the eagle thought it was a rock. I have to crack the tortoise. Oh, there's a nice shiny white rock, and it's like, no, that's Aeschylus's bald head. So may or may not be true. Just like people said that Euripides was torn apart by wild dogs, in Macedonia, where he had gone to exile because he was not, so popular politically in Athens. Probably not true, but it's great. It sounds good because the Bacchae, right, torn apart. Oh, Euripides got torn apart by wild dogs. It's like, great. Evidently one of his daughters might have been attacked by a rabid dog, so that the myth kind of grew around. That's how Euripides died. Sophocles just died at a very old age in his 90s after having written Oedipus at Colonus, and his son, it's interesting, the sons of some of these playwrights, I don't know that Euripides had any children, but Aeschylus had two sons that became playwrights, tragic poets. We have no idea, and nothing of their work exists. And Sophocles also had a son who wanted to get his father's lands and whatever, and took Sophocles to court. That court, the Areopagus, that's also on the slopes of the Acropolis in Athens. You go, you see the ruins of all these places. Tried to take his father to court. And Athens becomes really litigious. As soon as the Areopagus, the court was set up, that we see set up in the Oresteia, where humans are going to judge, other humans, we're going to set up this court system. As soon as that happens, everybody's taking everybody to court. Aristophanes is going to make big fun of this in the Clouds and places, just how litigious the Athenians are. It's like now, people will take anyone to court, sue someone at the drop of the hat. It's kind of what Athens was like, and Aristophanes is going to make fun of it. So Sophocles' son takes his father to court and says, my father's senile and he's over 90, and it's like, he can't manage things, and, he has, they didn't know about Alzheimer's, but he probably said, he has Alzheimer's before they knew what Alzheimer's was. And then Sophocles gets up and reads the choruses. reads what a work of, piece the thing that Shakespeare's going to play with in terms of man, the greatest thing of the greatest creation of God is man. What a wonder is man. So he reads that chorus or sings that chorus in the courtroom, and the judge says, "This man is not senile. He's still writing. Look how well he writes." And they threw the case out. Another little incident, these are also anecdotes and details that give you kind of just, like fill in, colorize the sketch of who these people were, trying to make, we don't know a lot about them, but the little pieces that we know, just bring them a little color to make them seem more real. So Euripides, who had left Macedonia left for Macedonia because people in Athens, the sort of aristocracy and because he was writing anti-war, he was criticizing Athens. This was and especially when Athens started to lose the war, and the Spartans were coming closer and closer and closer. Remember at Oedipus and Colonus in 406, when it was performed, the Spartans were outside the gates again. In Oedipus and Colonus, that beautiful chorus that talks about, "Oh, Colonus, land of running horses." In the Gospel of Colonus, it's a beautiful song. "Land of running horses, the sweet ivy grows." That was no more. They were listening to what was. It's like us in the climate. Did anyone march on the climate change march? Yeah. It's like us, singing about, "Oh, golden toad." Golden toad's extinct, In 5 years it might be, "Oh, honeybee." That's what it was. It was gone. They were mourning and singing about something that was gone and honoring it. Meanwhile, Euripides, with Trojan women a few years before, the year that Euripides came out with, how many of you know Trojan women? Is it something you've seen and talked about in high school or whatever?
Yeah.
Trojan women is like, the Bacchae is one of his great plays. Trojan women is one of his great plays. The Bacchae is really looking at, and we're talking about his thing with the gods, and the fact that we don't have these long choruses that praise the gods, that the gods are kind of like, they kind of come in, and he's criticized. Aristotle criticizes him for his deus ex machina.
Hand in the machine.
God in the machine, yeah, God in the machine, deus ex machina, which is the Latin term. The Greek is deus ex machina, something like that, similar. And we say the Latin deus ex machina generally. But that's what is a deus ex machina? Because it kind of happens at the end of Medea. Yeah.
When everything's fixed, but you don't really know how it got fixed.
Yeah, some God came in a machine. God comes down and says, "Okay." Shakespeare does it too. It's like, some of the things it's all a mess, and then a God comes, or the Duke comes, or the Prince comes. It's all a mess, and say, "Okay, we're going to really clean all of this out." So it's the Sophoclean idea that the world kind of comes back to an order, but in Sophocles it kind of happens because things are happening to the characters and they're having anagnorisis. In Euripides, a lot of times we don't have what Aristotle said made Greek tragedy. We don't have someone kind of suffer into wisdom. We have someone suffer, we have someone behave, but we don't have the ending kind of being put into order because of what they go through. Yeah, what was your question?
I was just asking, how do you spell the Deus?
Oh, it's Deus, then EX, and then MACHINA. I think it's in, did I put it in the notes? I might not have put it in the notes that I sent you on Birth of Tragedy. Yeah, yes, it is. Deus, or Apomechanus Theos is what it is in Greek. It's in the notes in the Birth of Theater, Birth of Tragedy, that the handout that I attached a couple of weeks ago. I try to send in writing most of the key things to remember. It's kind of like writing on the board. This thing's sort of like writing on the board. What I write on the board is really the things to remember. That's what these handout notes are, the summations. So Euripides is going to be, criticized the fact that you end the play by, okay, Medea's done all this stuff. Does she have an anagnorisis, the pity and fear? Does she learn something about herself? Does Jason learn something about himself? Does Aegeus even, who comes, who's going to be the father of Theseus, and that ties into a whole other. Does anybody really suffer into wisdom? Is there Mathos in Euripides' Medea? I mean, this would be the Aristotelian. Not really, right?
Yeah, no.
Not
No.
really. Yeah.
Well, I will say not in Euripides, but
In Seneca?
In Seneca, he does kind of like start to believe something else. Like, I wouldn't say like maybe it's suffering into wisdom, but he like says there, like literally his last line, or there are no gods.
There are no
So,
gods.
Yeah, that's kind of him like believing something else, I guess.
Yeah.
Even it might be good, it might be bad, but
Right. That there are no gods to blame, maybe, or to save or whatever. Yeah. 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 We'll talk about the difference between the two, especially when we talk about Rome and Seneca in the second part. Yeah.
When you're talking about suffering into wisdom, is
Yeah.
that because just in the Euripides version, I know the very last page of it, Jason is talking about kind of realizing how the root of the evil that's within Medea, and how he just hadn't seen it before, it finally clicked, and he says, "Oh, I married a tigress, not
Right.
a woman, not a wife."
But is that
Yeah,
wisdom
but-
about himself?
No.
Is that Anagnorisis is
Is that he-
self-recognition.
Yeah.
The theater
Yeah.
is seeing place this way and seeing this way. For the audience, right? And for the characters. It's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
That is the core of the point of what we're talking about. He has a realization, but it's like he's already decided. He's abandoned her.
Yeah.
He's been like dissing her
Yeah.
throughout the whole play.
I'll
You
write
know?
you a good
And-
letter recommendation. It's like,
Yeah. So what were you gonna say, Tanner?
Find something for you.
Basically that I mean, nothing, really, nothing.
Yeah.
And like
Jason's just an asshole.
Yeah, and like without
He's a
that
good guy.
anagnorisis and stuff, I know I felt reading the Euripides version that I just didn't understand like the justification of like the actions.
Of her actions?
Yeah, it just seems
Let's
like
talk about,
yeah.
Let's talk about, again, we're going back to, right, the whole thing of just, right?
Yeah.
Tragedy, equally just, this is also from Nietzsche, equally just, unjust, and just, both justifiable, right? That's what we're kind of looking at.
But everyone could have their own personal opinion, right?
Yeah, well,
That's-
that's the debate.
Right.
Because it's not about going, okay, now it's not about indoctrination. It's about education, in the same way that I talk about education, right? It's the cultivating of your ability to make informed choices. And the choice you make is the choice you make. But the whole idea that you are making these choices out of being fully informed, and not just, I know this, but really like thinking about it and saying, and that you're making choices with an awareness of consequences too. That whatever choice you make, it's not saying, okay, you're all supposed to think this way. It's like, you could think this, you could think this, but let's really get into a deep, understanding of this, not just a surface sound bite. This is what you're supposed to believe. Okay, check that off. Instant breakfast, add water, and you're done. This is like cooking for 5 hours, not putting something in the microwave. If you're talking about, ourselves as human beings and who we are as characters, the big one of the theatrical elements that Aristotle talks about. Character. And character in the way that character used to be used, where someone has character. When Martin Luther King, when I was like this high and my mother took me to the March on Washington. Did I tell you this story? Oh my God. This was, as someone said to me years later, they said, Morgan, that was your baptism. And I went, oh yeah, I think you're right. So, I'm this high, about 6. And my mother takes me, says, one summer, beautiful summer day, she says, okay, Heidela, that's my first name, Heide Morgan. Heidela, we're going to go, put on your shoes, we're going to go downtown, we're going to do something really important, don't tell your father. Because my father was pretty homophobic and racist and all those lovely things. He would have been in the Tea Party if he was alive today. No, So my mother and I were like, what are we doing here, So she says, we're going to do something important. And my mother's about your color, actually, because she was from Italy, Croatia, but I think they probably had Turkish in their family. I don't know what was in their family, but she was pretty much your color. Beautiful. And so we went down to the Washington Monument grounds and the reflecting pool. You know Washington, D.C.?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So here's the reflecting pool, here's the Lincoln Memorial, here's the Washington Monument. There's people all around the reflecting pool. So we get a little space, like right here on the corner, right by the corner of the reflecting pool, right? And they had speakers, but they were kind of far away because I didn't think they expected that many, so I sort of vaguely heard it was being said, and I heard, whoa, 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 and everyone would cheer, and I went, whoa, 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 and it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. It was these triplets, and this sort of like, and it was like, wow, and I was like, everyone's like ecstatic, and my mother's happy because she's kind of with people who kind of look like her, and she's like feeling at home, and I was like, and then he goes, the crowd surges, and I topple into the reflecting pool. And I keep looking at photographs of that day, literally going, there's a little splash, there's a little person in there, it's so far away, I'm never going to find it. But so I don't fall in, I kind of fall in up to my little knees and whatever, and then I'm picked up and everyone's going, oh, it's nice sunny, and it's like, wow, and then my friend said, that was your baptism. I went, oh my God, I never even thought of it that way. And it was really funny, and actually I just realized that there was this, I'm blanking on the artist's name, but he was done at Under the Radar, which the public has sponsored, which is like this production of like this theater that comes from all over the world that kind of does different things. It's not plays, it's like performance. And there was this thing where he's originally from Australia. He does things that are based on statistics, literally, like with grains of rice. So it's like one of the most amazing one is that counted up how many millionaires there are in the world, and that was a pile of rice, like about this big. And then it counted up how many refugees there were in the world, and it was a pile of rice about the same size. And you looked at it and you thought, wow, each millionaire in the world could probably take personal responsibility for each refugee in the world and kind of solve the world's problems. I mean, we could even take responsibility for a refugee considering some of the situations in terms of the direness. We could probably eke it out. Not, have a few less lattes, not go to a movie, not to have drinks, Could probably take care of a refugee. But the millionaires totally could take care of refugees. And it was the most interesting installation because you just saw there was like what the carbon footprint was of different nations, like Saudi Arabia actually was the biggest one. We were in there too, China, like how, what the carbon footprint was of various nations. The little piles of rice were just a couple of grains of rice in terms of like how people impacted the environment. So he had one. If you Google this, I'll send you the link because they just did it somewhere, and he told this story, which I couldn't believe because someone sent me the link and said, Morgan, he's still telling this story. And I went, you're kidding me. So he had this installation of rice. So there's all these grains of rice around this blank area, right, which is the reflecting pool and all the grains of rice, on the steps of the Lincoln Monument. And so it was the opening because, we were involved in producing it. I was there with him, and I said, I have a funny story. I said, I actually know pretty much which 2 grains of rice were my mother and me. And he said, I don't think I've ever encountered that. I said, yeah, because we were standing right here on the corner. So it's one of these like 4 or 5 grains of rice here. It's probably my mother and me. So I told him the story, and he said, I'll never forget, it was the greatest moment. He said, well, then this installation is completely wrong. And he takes his tweezers that he always had in his pocket to pick up little, rice, and he takes it, and he takes one of the little grains of rice, and he sticks it into the reflecting pool. And I said to my friend, I didn't have my phone, I said, you have to go down and take a picture of this, because he would put it back, because it doesn't make any sense, It's like, it looked like a piece of rice fell, if you didn't know the story, outside of that. It was just for that one moment, really, that he put that little grain of rice there, and said, oh, this is wrong, and then there you are, in the reflecting pool. So a friend of mine who knew this story said, they just did the installation, and he talked about it, and he said, you know, that piece really has an impact of all the installations. The March on Washington one really has an impact. In fact, in New York, a woman came up to me and said, "I was 5 years old, and I was there." He said, I was like, I was 6, but you know, I was. He got it wrong, but that he remembered this story, which is fine. But that's kind of the whole thing. Side story to the fact that when I saw the television, I really realized that what was being said that I heard is whoa, 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 was I have a dream, and the whole thing. The whole thing, what he talks about in that day, on that day, was about not being judged, that, you know, wanted his children and their children not to be judged by the color of their skin. Do you know this? Do you know the quote? But the content of their character. And this is what the Greeks and Aristotle meant when they said character. This is the whole idea that used to be, it's not so much anymore, that you lived your life because you wanted to build character. You wanted to, I mean, it was sometimes, you know, talk about that. But it's not about what you got or what it was like. Who were you as a human being? What was the content of your character? And this is what the plays are about. This is why character is not just character in a kind of way, you know, surface way, that we talk about character, but character in that deep way. And character as opposed to the decisions people make, core decisions about, including about justice. What is just, what is unjust, and what is justifiable? That question is a lot that's at the core of what these characters are. So, a very, very good question about, tied into the character of Medea and how she's portrayed. Just, justifiable, just, unjust, justifiable. Now, Medea in some ways has a kind of, you know, resonance with Clytemnestra in the Oresteia. You know, she has a resonance even with someone like, you know, potentially with Antigone, who's defying, you know, the laws that are being, you know, who's saying this thing, you know, the laws, the ancient laws and emotion and the whole thing, the difference between, no, I feel this is right, and this ancient laws and justice, and that trumps your societal order, your kind of enforced societal order that you're just, you know, arbitrarily saying. No God told you not to bury Polynices. It's not like Orestes, who had a god tell him to kill his mother to avenge his father. No God told Creon to bury Polynices, but there's a gods and a law before the new gods, going all the way back to the old gods, that say you cannot leave a body unburied, right? So now this whole idea of the ancient gods, right, connected to the Furies, connected to the matriarchal societies that existed there before the Ionians, the Dorians and the Ionians came down from the north. That's even fading, that's starting to fade in Euripides, but even the Greek gods are starting to fade in terms of the power. And Seneca will say that when he says there are no gods. But even in Euripides, it's like the gods and the power of the gods. There's this deus ex machina. Because Medea, let's talk about the character of Medea. Who is she and what's their backstory? Now, this backstory ties into Jason, right? Jason and the Argonauts, right? Who knows anything about the myth of Jason and the Argonauts? There's this great corny film from the 50s that first was like he goes on all these adventures, right, around the known world at the time in order to get what? What's he supposed to go get?
Golden fleece.
The golden fleece. The golden fleece, right. So, I'm going to first pass around this little map, which is basically the journey that the Argo takes, this is the known world. And you can see where Asia Minor is. This is where Europa was, Colchis, which is somewhere around Iran now, or the Caucasus Mountains. The Ionian, Dorian Greeks are going to come down from here. It's basically the Baltics. They're going to know that's who we know as the ancient Greece who are going to come down into this area. But if you look at this map, you can kind of see his route and all the adventures that he has in the mythology of Jason and the Argonauts. So who knows some of the backstory? Who knows any of this myth? Yeah, what do you remember? It's another oracle.
Really
It's
just
another
like-
prophecy, right? That the Peleus was like warned about a guy with a single sandal, and Jason is sent off to get the golden fleece because it's thought he will never return and never survive it, right? There's a dragon, guarding the golden fleece. Serpent. It's Medea's father, right? It's in Media. That's the country. And very much like Theseus, he's going to be helped by Minos' daughter, Andromache, right? He gives him the ball of twine so he can find his way through the labyrinth when he goes to kill the Minotaur, right? And her sister, whose name is Phaedra, who he's going to later marry after he abandons Andromache on an island, presumably because she joined the cult of Dionysus. There's one story that he abandoned her. But so Aphrodite makes Medea fall in love with Jason and help him to get the golden fleece. And she is a high priestess, Hecate. She's a foreigner. She's dark. She's from the east. She's, this foreigner coming into xenophobic Greece. Jason, maybe falls in love with her, maybe just uses her, but she's made to fall in love with him, and she goes against her own family in order to help him. So let's look at the character of Medea, right? There she is in her country. This pale guy kind of shows up, right, and is going to take their great treasure, right? She's going to go against her father. Her brother goes on the ship, right, with them, flees. Her younger brother flees, and what does she do? Her father's coming. She chops him up into little pieces. Again, Dionysus, right, torn apart. The Egyptian, the Abydos Passion plays, which are kind of going to be repeated, even though not directly influencing the medieval morality and mystery plays that are going to be psycho plays. The Abydos Passion plays. Remember where, Osiris chopped into little pieces by his evil brother Set, scattered all over Egypt, and Isis, his sister, goes and picks up the pieces and remembers them, and then he resurrects. So she does the same thing, and there's this whole thing about chopping up and putting it back and resurrecting too, which they do with the king, right, when they try to get away from Peleus. So she chops up her brother and throws the pieces off the boat, and that stops her father and his men from chasing them, because it's like, oh my God, there's my son's head, and there's my son's right arm, and there's my son's leg, and we have to retrieve it and piece it back together, right? So she betrays everything, right? Gives up everything, gives up her power. She's very powerful. She's a high priestess. Betrays her country, betrays her, all for the love of this man. And so he goes back to his country where he is legitimately supposed to be the heir, but he can't do that, right? So then they flee to another country where they're both strangers. But Jason at least is Greek. He's from another city-state, but he's Greek, right? So he's like, all right, so they come to, well, they're not going to New York City, because we'll say Athens. New York City is Athens, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe his he's originally from, I don't know, pick a city that has some status, but not a lot.
Houston.
Houston. He's originally from Houston. And then they go to the Boston. Let's say Boston, because I think they're probably, they go to Boston, right? So, he's kind of part of it, but he's American, and she's from Iran. Iraq. She's from somewhere there, which she is from that part, right?
Yeah, maybe you should flip the two.
Huh?
Maybe you should flip the two. They go from Boston to Houston.
Maybe they go from Boston to Houston. Yeah, let's do that.
True.
Yeah, I think that's true. The Boston's pretty.
I mean, I don't know Boston. so
Boston's
it's-
got its own issues. What?
Oh, no, no. Never mind.
What? Are you
No.
from Boston?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry, does Boston have more status than Houston?
More.
More status than Houston? I don't know. Like, I don't know.
Boston has more status than
Yeah.
Oh, I was just thinking.
It was more of like the resentment.
The
of-
resentment, the xenophobia.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
talking about xenophobia.
Oh.
We're talking
Okay,
about
yeah,
racism, xenophobia.
Yeah.
That's
I was
what
gonna
that
say
was.
Boston has some deep issues.
Okay,
Yeah.
But like Houston, like is more blatant. So let's say,
Yeah.
yeah, Boston is a little bit like, we're pretending we're not.
Yeah.
But yeah, but Houston, yeah, let's say they go to Houston. Okay. So, he's this guy, but at least, he fits in. He's not down, but he fits in. She is a foreign woman who's just, different, looks different, and there she is with him. She has borne him 2 children, right? So suddenly, he is going to, might be able to marry the mayor's daughter, right? Which he wants, this is going to give him status. He would have been inherited the mayor, let's say, our elections, or inherit. He would have been the mayor, the king of Boston, right? He can't, he's lost that. He's on the run. So he has a chance now to get into the lineage of this other city-state by marrying the king's daughter, who's younger, who's blonde, who's like, blonde and like, status and all that. So he says, guess what, Medea? Sorry. Older, darker, foreigner, there in this land trying to navigate, maybe some of the women are sort of feel sympathetic to her. He said, but I'm done with you, and I'm going to do this for me, because that's what I care about, You did all this for me, but I'm going to do this for me now, and you shouldn't have any problem with that because of all the reasons, You're a woman, and you're a foreigner, and, it's like, yeah, what's the problem?
Why are you mad?
Why are you mad? So let's talk about names like Andrea Dworkin and Susan Smith, was it? The real women, because there's been these stories, right, in the last years of women who kill their children. And a lot of times, sometimes it's like the reasons of postpartum, but a lot of times it's like they're angry at their husbands, right?
It's funny that this thing of being torn, like how she tears apart her brother in Puerto Rico, there's been more than twice women that kill their children and then chop them up and put them in the refrigerator so they found them, like we found their pieces. It's happened more than once.
Did they ever serve them to their husbands?
I don't know, but
Titus Andronicus.
Like Titus Andronicus, and like the whole history of the house of Atreus, Pelops, right? Who gets served,
No.
who gets served by Tantalus to the gods, and
Yeah,
Yes.
they just leave them in the refrigerator, and then the neighbors miss the kids like roaming around, and then
so they become this talisman of
Yeah.
the bodies of the
Is it
and
children.
it's a
women
very
run?
small town.
Or
Yeah,
What?
do the women run, or do they just like?
No,
No,
they
they're
just
there.
stay. Like,
and are the husbands around, or
Not usually.
yeah, okay.
I mean, I've only
Is
heard
it
of 2
economic?
times.
Is it? Do you know what the
I know.
reasons are?
It's usually in really rural towns
Right,
in Puerto
yeah.
Rico.
Yeah.
And it's usually like there's been some domestic violence involved. Like there's always that, history.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, well, Susan Smith, Andrea Dworkin, what are some
and it
of the
happened in
others?
Spain with a man who
Yeah,
burned
Casey
his 2
Anthony.
children.
Casey Anthony.
But he burned them
Yeah.
in Spain.
She did.
But
They
it was
burned
a
them?
man. It was a man though.
Oh,
In
okay.
Puerto Rico, it's been
Oh.
Yeah, but it's really
I
interesting.
don't know.
Is it like an epidemic of women
It's
killing
just
their
weird. I don't.
Is it lately or is it?
No, it's
Oh.
happened. It happened when I was like 11, and then it happened again recently.
But here in this
So
country,
it's been-
you know, it's
Yeah.
been, you
Yeah.
know, like you get one every 3-4 years, you get a case of like, you know, blocking
Well,
your
it
car
has an
and
adaptation
drowning.
of Medea.
This is-
Huh?
Medea and Rue. I'm not sure if you heard of it. Neil
Which one?
Neil,
There was
you
one-
wrote an
Yeah.
adaptation.
There was
Yeah.
one recently
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the
What's it
kid
called?
with Asperger's, was it?
Medea and Rue or so.
But
It's
it
a
is-
show.
Well, there was
What
a
did the
kid
kid have?
like last year who
Neil
was
abuse.
severely autistic and like
Yes.
ran away.
Yeah.
But that wasn't necessarily a
No,
domestic.
but what about the woman who tried to she tried to kill it was, I think her kid was autistic and she like
Oh,
tried
yeah,
to
yeah,
kill,
that was just recently.
she tried to like
did
commit
she-
like a double suicide. She
Yeah,
like
this
drove
was
out in the
just
middle of
recently,
nowhere
like a
and like
few months-
tried to
Like a few weeks ago this was. Or a month ago. It was
Yeah,
in the
like a
news
couple-
few-
it was like
yeah,
this
yeah,
summer,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think.
this
What
summer,
happened?
this
She
summer.
plugged the car.
Where was this?
she like it was in I don't
The
know.
kid did die, right?
No,
Oh,
they
the
both
kid didn't.
survived.
They both survived. Okay. Yeah, in Arizona, somewhere. They drove into the
Somewhere.
desert.
It was like in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere.
Yeah, yeah,
She
yeah.
was gonna kill him in a car.
So
No, it was like like in House of Cards, like the poison.
Oh,
it's like
Carmen
the,
Monante?
Yes.
Oh.
yeah,
that.
That's rough.
because she couldn't deal with the
Oh, yeah.
autistic child.
Yeah, she was like, it's better for everyone.
Yeah, she couldn't deal with it, and so you know.
And that's like one of the things like in Medea that she makes like that strange excuse of like it's almost better, you know what good is it for like if I kill them now, like
Well, yeah. Because she
it's
says
no
they're
worse
born.
than
Right.
like how they're gonna end up
Right,
anyway.
and this is the whole
Yeah.
thing that she's.
In this
That's
life,
a really.
like-
This is a really, really important point in terms of like
What's it
when that moment is of her approaching, why she's going to kill them, how eager she's not like in Seneca. It's kind of like the kids.
she's-
It's like I'm
And then
killing
she
this
just
one.
kills them
Oh yeah,
randomly.
Jason, I'm up here on the roof with the
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
One's already
She's
dead.
really
See,
great
it's like
child.
hanging from me. See the body of your one son. I got this other son right
Yeah.
here. I'm gonna throw him from the roof. No, there he goes, Jason.
Yeah.
How do you feel now? You know,
Freaked me out because that's so different from the
Euripides.
This one.
Yes.
Like, she
Yeah.
was really, really sad. In this
she was
one.
really, really
She was
sad.
like, hey,
She
I
has-
mean,
Yeah,
I don't know.
what does she say? She says,
Has to.
She says I'll stick a pin on every single one of the kids
Yeah,
like
that
in
was
my
it.
ovaries or something like that.
She
No,
says
she's like-
on line 1078, she says, "The evil that I do, I understand full well, but a passion drives me greater than my will. Passion is the curse of man. It wreaks the greatest ill."
and that's what Seneca is going to talk about in a lot of his plays,
Yeah.
because he is reading his plays
1078.
to the court of Nero, where it's all about passion, right? Just people like saying, okay, the history of what's happening in the Roman, emperor's court is like, from Caligula to Nero, and Nero is saying, I don't like my wife, I'm going to kick her down the stairs, Literally, there's all this unbridled passion. And Seneca was a Stoic. Seneca was believed in Stoicism. And Stoicism is about when you're in a really difficult situation, it's like, okay, I'm not going to be able to maybe change this, but I'm going to find a way to navigate through it. And I'm going to find that little place of calm. I'm not going to get all into, I'm going to endure it. I'm going to endure the chaos and the pain of it, Stoicism, right? But I'm going to try to find a way to a path of light, in a way. We're going all the way back to Aeschylus, how to find a way to path to light out of darkness. And Stoicism was very much something that Seneca was involved with. So a lot of Seneca's plays, he puts the violence on stage, right? In the Euripides version, we just hear about Medea, doing it. It happens off stage.
The messenger
It's
comes.
the
and
messenger
describes
again. The messenger violence in the Greek theater is obscena, the root of obscene, off the stage. Off, skena, the stage. Skena is going to turn into scene, right? So skena, obscene. We just hear about the violence. In the Bacchae, we hear the messengers. We tell how Pentheus, who climbed up a tree so he could spy on the sacred rituals of Dionysus and the women, is spotted, and then Dionysus bends the tree down so that the women get him, and they tear him apart in their madness and in their rage that they're, and that Dionysus has put on them, including Pentheus' own mother, Agave, who thinks she has a lion, a dangerous lion, and tears and helps tear her son's body. He's screaming, Mama, it's me, it's me. He's dressed as a woman. She doesn't recognize him. She thinks she has a lion. She comes back to Thebes with his bloody head in her hands. They have to go pick up all the pieces of Pentheus scattered on the mountain. And she comes back with his bloody head, holding him by the hair, saying, look at this lion that I have, killed, and look at the lion's head. And then Tiresias has to say to her, no, look at what you really have. Look into the face. Come out of your madness and see what you have. And she realized that she has her son's face. And then Dionysus has proved his power to the population of Thebes. You're not going to accept me as a god. But Euripides is saying, Pentheus kind of going, no, I'm going to lock you up and I'm not going to allow this Asian worship into my city, or let my mother and all the women, have been possessed, and they're going up the slopes of Mount Cithaeron, the slopes that Oedipus was left as a baby to die outside of Thebes, the same mountain. I'm not going to let my aunt and my mother and all the women go up and be possessed by this Asian god, with his ancient, un-Greek barbarian rites, right? And going, no, I'm going to, lock him up, but I'm still, interested in seeing it, right? So I'm going to break the sacred barrier, but I'm not supposed to witness it. At the same time, I'm condemning it. I want to witness it, which is an interesting kind of thing about repression. It's like, oh, I'm going to put you down, but at the same time, I really want to be, witness it, which is, we often see that. But both of them, they're 19, and both of them are acting badly. In the Bacchae, it's not that Pentheus is right when, and Dionysus is wrong, or Dionysus is right and Pentheus is wrong. A lot of productions, they kind of take one side or another. They'll say, oh, here's this uncontrollable, chaotic force that's messing up poor Pentheus trying to have order in Thebes. And other people will say, no, here's repressed Pentheus. And, they'll do things set it in the 60s, and the Bacchians, the Manids are hippies, and these comments all and they'll say, no, it's about liberation, and, Pentheus deserved what he got. What I think what Euripides was really saying when he was writing it is a little bit like what Seneca is going to say. Both sides are actually wrong, that what you need the balance of both, and they're both behaving out of their, Dionysus is not right simply because he's a god. He's acting as bratty as Pentheus is in some ways. And this for sort of the criticism that Euripides is going to have of the gods, and I'm you believe in the gods? Why are you believing in these gods? The Greek gods were given all kinds of bad behavior. Hera was jealous of her husband and Zeus and turning all these women into animals, right? And it's so or telling them, in the case of Dionysus, what started this all in the Bacchae was that his mother, Semele, who's Agave's sister, basically, who Zeus, had fallen in love with or raped or whatever in the stories, Hera had said to her, oh, if Zeus really loves you, he'll let you see him in his aegis, right? In his gorgeous breastplate, in his deity, in his full glory as a god, which a human being could not survive. So she said, oh, okay, I'll ask him, right? And so she says, will you promise me anything? Will you give me, how much do you love me? Will you promise me anything? And he said, of course, I will. She said, I want to see you in your full glory. And he's promised, right? He said he can't go back on that. And so he puts on the breastplate, and she looks, she bursts into flame, and he reaches into her womb, and he takes out, the baby Dionysus, slits open his thigh, puts the baby in there, and then the baby gets born out of his thigh. Twice born Dionysus. Born out of his mother's burning womb, and then born out of his father's, thy. So in the Bacchae, Dionysus comes back to Thebes, where they, had not been now saying that, no, she wasn't impregnated by a god, she just, had an affair with a mortal man, and he's not a god, and he's just her bastard child, and he's saying, no, you don't think I have power? I'm going to show you my power, Thebes. Aunt Agave, her sister, you turned your back on my mother? I'm going to make you crazy. I'm going to make you worship me up in the hills and dress in skins and have your breasts hang out, right? You think of the most, let's go back to Boston, because I think Boston is actually a good town for this. Prim little Bostonians, daughters of the revolution. Think of Agave as that. And suddenly, this mad, bacchanalian that comes, you drink and have sex and orgies and whatever the thing is. You have the life force, the Dionysian life force. Suddenly, the most prim, society, daughter of the revolution matron is up, in the park, bare-breasted and, feeding feeding little baby sheep with, at her breast and drinking wine, and dancing and, doing all this and having lesbian affairs and whatever is going on.
There's something like that in 1984, right? Or something like that where they have the time of the day where everyone just goes mad on each other.
Yes, and that, or like that, what's that film where the Purge?
The Purge.
The Purge,
The
yeah.
Purge.
And
That is one of the scariest premises. to me.
But that is a Dionysian idea,
Yeah.
right? In the midst of repression, it's like what the Amish do. They have this summer, when you get a certain, what is it called? I forget what it's called. You get to a certain age and you can have sex, you can do whatever you want before you decide that you're going to really enter the community. It's like, you have to have this what's it called? I can't
Breaking
remember.
Amish.
No, it's your Rumspringer.
Rumspringer. That is
Yeah.
Rumspringer, yes. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
which was like you're 16 or 17.
Yeah.
And you get to
long-
have a summer.
in
Like
what
You can go for as long as you want. It's
Oh,
just
is
as
it
soon
go-
as you go back, you have to.
You have
so
to
you
give it
either
away.
leave forever,
Yeah, or
you
you-
come back in a
Which is an
certain-
amazing
What's the
thing.
sign?
It's
yeah.
Amish.
Amish, yeah.
And the
That's
Amish,
the whole
it's
breaking
brilliant.
Amish.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's
Oh,
like,
that's what
Come
that's.
back after
Oh.
that.
Yeah.
and you get it out of your
Okay.
system.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they go experience the
Yeah.
world and they
Yeah.
travel and see different lifestyles
Yeah.
and say,
Huh.
is this right
Yeah,
for
and they
me?
can do all
They
the
can-
things,
yeah.
smoke and drink, do.
But as soon as they go
drive
back,
cars,
that's it. You're
yeah.
done. Yeah.
If they didn't let them do that, would it be considered a cult?
No, I think it's that's. I think
Well,
that's
that's an
part of
interesting,
the.
but that's a really
Yeah.
interesting question in terms of
See
what's a
other
kind of,
Yeah.
when does something become a cult? It's
I'm-
really an
That's true,
interesting
that's good.
question.
Fascinated by
That is an interesting question, because that's how Pentheus sees Dionysus, as a cult. And he thinks, all of a sudden there's this, Jim Jones is coming in and saying he wants to set up, his cult in my city. What's a cult now? That's considered threatening. I don't know.
I just like Kevin Bacon TV show, The Following. That whole the religion based off of what's his name, Emerson or some old writer, and they just
Oh, I guess
Transcendentalist.
Yeah.
like the
Which is actually
Fred Phelps
transcendentalist kind
people.
of wonderful.
I feel like it's any group that, to me, any group that once you join, you can't leave.
No, the
And they
the
just
Fred
start
Phelps.
you
say you
lose your
can't.
own
What's that
self.
church called?
Yeah.
Uh,
They'll
Sci-
kill you.
not science.
Tiara.
Oh yeah, that they were
Yeah.
God hates
deprogramming.
fags. Those,
What?
Yeah, what is that?
Oh, the
Fred
Baptist,
Phelps.
Westboro Baptist.
Yes.
I would. I don't. Yeah.
That's pretty culty.
That's pretty culty.
Yeah.
Pretty brainwashing.
And it's so interesting because in
Yeah.
the Islamic world, a lot of people are saying you look at someone like ISIS, we look at them the way you look at the Westboro Baptist Church.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
ISIS is
yeah.
a cult. Yeah.
It is a kind of a cult. The same the way it is.
Yeah.
It is kind of a
Or
cult.
the way that
And there's
Al-Qaeda.
reasons for it. There are reasons for it which are really understandable and justifiable when you look at it. It's just like the Khmer Rouge. You look at ISIS. I look at ISIS. I don't know if you know the Khmer Rouge. This was like in Cambodia. It was like they were like saying Cambodia's corrupt or whatever, and they were living up in the mountains eating bugs, and getting more and more, ritualistic and, and fundamentalist, all the fundamentalist thing. And in a way, in the Bacchae, Dionysius is kind of, he starts by saying just allow the religion to exist. But the more Pentheus says, no, you can't have it at all, the more fundamentalist. Do you know what I mean? It becomes, so in a way, the Bacchae is seeing something that could be part of a fabric of society and just be one of the choices that you can make. Pentheus says, no, this is not a choice that I'm going to allow. So within the process of the play, you watch the Bacchians, this religion, become more fundamentalist and become more dangerous and actually destroy the society that was trying to repress it. And it's a whole thing about repression and extremism and whatever. So by the end of the play, Dionysius is banishing, and punishing Tiresias, and Cadmus, who hasn't done anything, is banishing Agave, who he put a spell on, let's face it, and made her do that. And it's like, oh my God, and she has this kind of agnosis where she says, okay, I shouldn't have done that to my sister, and I should have acknowledged she was a god. And he said, that's right, now you're banished. It's like, really? You can't say, now you've learned your lesson, now we can, all, come back to it. No, he says, you're banished, yeah, I'm God. Because this is kind of like at the end of the Bacchae, Euripides isn't saying, oh yes, this is all going to go back to order. It's going to say, no, both these ideas are kind of screwed up, because both of them are fundamentalist ideas, right? And Athens right now is at war, and we're in this war with Sparta because Athens was kind of fundamentalist and rigid and saying, we're Athens and we're the greatest, and you have to bow under our spell. We're going to spread our democracy all over Greece. We're going to give our democracy all over Greece. Yeah, it's interesting the way these things come around again. So Euripides is critical of Athens when he writes, like Trojan Women, because Trojan Women was written because Athens had just gone, there was a little island in, Greece has all these little islands. There was a little island that was closer to the shores of Asia Minor called Miletus, and Athens, and they had sort of said, no, we're not going to be part of the Athenian League, we're not going to be part of this. I don't even know that they really had allied with Sparta directly. They just said, they had trade agreements. They said, no, we don't want to be part of this war. We don't want to support Athens. And Athens went in there, destroyed the city, killed most of the men, enslaved the women and children. So this had just happened, like, within the year before Euripides wrote Trojan Women. So when he writes Trojan Women, setting the, where it's like the Trojan Women's kind of lament, and you hear from all these different women, from Hecuba, you hear from Andromache, you hear, oh, Troy, the fall of Troy. After 9/11 happened, I actually had a class, my first class was The Birth of Tragedy, and we read the lament for Troy, at the fall of Troy, with the towers falling. There's this amazing description in Euripides' play of the towers falling and whatever, and the chorus going, Troy, Troy, Troy. And my class read it, Hecuba and the chorus reading that. And it was the most amazingly cathartic thing, because everyone was so devastated. And here was this Greek play that talked about the city, the towers falling, and just these women watching their city being destroyed and not knowing what's going to happen to them. And that was exactly the emotional state that my class was in, that we were all in. And I swear to God, it remains the best reading of that chorus I've heard in my life, because everyone knew what the Greeks were feeling. So in Athens, when the Trojan Women was performed, Athens was still, it was divided. Some people saying, yeah, we should have, they're going to be our own. Some people were going, holy cow, what are we doing? We're Athenians. We're not supposed to be about, it's like Israel right now, Everyone's going, yeah. It's like, a large part of Israelis are going, holy shit, this is not what it means to be a Jew. This is not why we had Israel. it's like, what is going on, you know? So it's a really interesting, complicated place, and this is why Euripides, they're not going to give Euripides first prize for Trojan women. They definitely are not going to give him first prize. It's like they're going to say, all right, well, are you criticizing what we're doing? Are you not being patriotic? But the people are going, yeah, man. Yeah. I don't know about this. I don't know about what our leaders are doing here. We're going to keep this play. We're going to make sure this play survives. You might not be given first prize for this. You might not be given the goat. Tragedoia is a goat song, and supposedly a goat was given his first prize. You might not get the goat. Get your goat. But we're going to preserve this play somehow through history.
That's so cool.
And
So,
going back to Medea,
yeah.
like when I was reading it, I was just like, I cannot believe a man wrote this. Like the things I've never heard of, and I can't imagine them. Like this is like what stuck out to me when she says, "We women, on the other hand,
Yeah.
turn only to a single man. We live safe at home than say. They do battle with spear. How superficial! I'd rather stand my ground 3 times among the shields than face a childbirth once." And I was like, holy shit! Like a woman is saying this. Like
That's right.
especially
And
because of
this
public
is the
knowledge.
man who Aristophanes is going to say is a misogynist. And he's going to end up with this face of like, oh yes, Euripides hates women. Euripides does not.
And I want to add that when she's talking to Aegeus,
Yes.
she's like, she almost makes fun of the fact she uses that women are looked down upon as
Yeah.
a way of her to do her deed. She's like, this guy, he's so stupid. He
Yeah.
actually thinks I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
I
Yep.
really think that that's interesting how,
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that I see more in Euripides than in Seven.
Yeah.
That I thought that was
And why don't we hear, after she, she kind of hears,
she's
Jason.
Kind of mocking. She's mocking them.
Yeah. So
Like,
Yeah.
So she's going to get rid of this bride, right? She
Yeah.
says, here's these gifts, give her the gifts. She's decided, okay. It's a little like Dionysus. It's like, okay, you think, I don't have any power? I'm going to show you my power. And you're going to marry, no, you're not going to marry this little, Paris Hilton. You're not going to marry her, So the chorus says, now there is no hope left for the children's lives. Now there is none. They are walking already to murder. The bride, poor bride, will accept the curse of gold, will accept the bright diadem. Around her yellow hair she will set that dress of death with her own hands. Yellow hair. Remember these? Achilles, blonde. The grace, this is where a lot of this crap starts. It starts with the Greeks. The grace and the perfume and glow of the golden robe will charm her to put them upon her and wear the wreath. And now her wedding will be with the dead below. Into such a trap she will fall, poor thing, into such a fate of death and never escape from under that curse. You too, O wretched bridegroom, making your match with kings, you do not see that you bring destruction on your children and on her, your wife of fearful death. Poor soul, what a fall is yours. In your grief too I weep, mother of little children, you who will murder your own in vengeance for the loss of married love which Jason has betrayed as he lives with another wife. The chorus is like Cassandra. They know what's going to happen. And they feel pity and fear for what's going to happen. But it's them. And then the tutor. Mistress, I tell you that these children are reprieved, and the royal bride has been pleased to take her in her hands your gifts. In that quarter the children are secure. But come. This is the reversal, right? The peripetia that we talked about. Oh, he thinks this is great. The children, it's like there's a hope. She liked the children. It's all about like maybe she'll take the children as her servants, and treat them nicely. Oh, honey, go, Jason, yeah, you can have your kids bring me my shoes,
What page are you on?
Oh, I'm on this other, I'm reading from a different translation, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
'cause-
yeah. Let's go to
It's
the
like
translation I sent, so you can follow along.
It's strange that in like the Euripides chorus, they pity Medea, and then in the Seneca chorus, they
Yep.
really like are like spiteful of her.
That's right,
Yeah.
because in
Totally
Seneca,
changes the way you feel about Medea.
and it's really interesting because when people say Medea, you know, oh, the witch, it's Seneca's Medea. I sent, in the links I
Yeah.
sent you, there's Zoe Caldwell plays like in the Euripides Medea, but I think she's giving a Senecan Medea performance in the Euripides play. Judith Anderson gives much more of a sort of Euripides measured performance. But a lot of actresses, when they play the Euripides, will play the Seneca Medea. Yeah.
What I liked about Euripides is he was able to depict a really strong woman that a lot of people are afraid of, or at least like the nurse is afraid of, the chorus is all afraid of her,
Yeah.
without her having to be like a witch or a supernatural creature. Where with, like you're saying, with Seneca, she was a witch, you know, she was
Literally.
evil and not human. Where
Yeah.
with Euripides, she's still human and
Yeah.
people are still afraid of her, but she's a woman.
She's a woman. And you feel she's in this ate. Remember that ate, that word? The place between a rock and the hard place where all the actions that either you've taken or have happened to you have you in this place where it doesn't matter what choice you make, you are screwed. She's in ate. What is she going to do at this point? What are her choices? Either choice she makes, she, as like, let's take the lesser of two evils, or let's, what are we going to do? Yeah.
I think definitely what helped was like at the beginning, I felt like they had a lot more like pity for her, like a lot more pathos, and then like the
Yes,
the
exactly.
contrast like towards the end was definitely like, I think that's definitely what made her a lot more scary because like in this one she's just scary from the beginning.
In Seneca.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Seneca.
Yeah,
So
yeah. She's like the witch, and it's just like she is that, oh, I married a monster.
She makes
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
cauldron. She has the cauldron.
She has
Yeah.
the guy, that's right, that's right.
Yeah.
It's like the witches in Macbeth.
Yeah.
When you think of the witches, think of the witches in Macbeth, right?
That's three,
Yeah.
yeah.
They're like the Furies. They are
Yeah.
connected to ancient religion in Scotland. They are connected to the ancient religion, not to the new religion that's coming in, Christianity. They are like Hecate and all that. The witches in Macbeth, he goes to the witches in Macbeth, right?
Yeah.
He goes back to the ancient religion in that play. That's really interesting how that. So in so it's on 64.
thank you.
Yeah. So I'll read from this one. My lady, your boys, they won't be banished. And the princess, the bride, with her own hand, she took your presents, oh, so gladly. Now the children's danger is over. He's baffled by Medea's grim reaction. Well, I never. Isn't this good? This is much more colloquial.
Yeah.
Paul Roche makes it much more colloquial,
Yeah.
which is actually fun, because I think it makes it more accessible. Well, I never. Isn't this good news? What so transfixes you? Well, I never. Isn't this good news? That is the peripeteia, right? That is the reversal. Something we think is going to be good ends up being, oh, so not good, right? So Medea draws in her breath in a muffled cry of pain, right? She's in ate. She is not in like, ha, 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 my evil plan is moving forward. What I hear is out of tune with what I say, the tutor says. She sighs deeply. I thought I brought good news. What kind of news, I wonder, have I brought? Medea says, can we have a volunteer to read Medea? Read this big speech that's coming up? Yes?
Oh,
No?
I'm sorry, no. I thought you were volunteering for something else.
What?
Sorry.
No?
I thought I was volunteering for
No,
something else.
Come on, actresses! Several of you are so born to play this role. Yeah?
So that's a great role for you.
Not for you. Sorry.
What you wait?
Not for you.
You can play the
You can play the
princess.
bride.
Yeah.
Oh, I just got it right. Sorry, yellow hair. Forget it.
Sorry.
What you have brought. The fault is not with you.
Who wants to read the tutor?
I don't. It's on my.
Okay.
Why, my lady, these shuttered eyes, these tears falling.
Oh, I am pressed, old friend, hard pressed, the gods and my own evil counsel.
Courage, dear mistress. Your sons will always bring you home.
Home? First I must send others there. Mercy.
You are not the only mother to be severed from her sons. We have to bear our own humanely.
Now that's the whole thing. That line, we have to bear our own humanity. Humanely, right? this is also what Seneca is going to, this is Stoicism. You know, Seneca is going to sort of say, I'm going to show you what happens when unbridled passion, you know, kind of just runs away with people, you know, and what he's trying to do in the middle of Nero's court with this play, showing the violence, you know, not on stage if they're performed, but certainly, you know, putting it right out there, is he's saying, we have to bear our own humanity humanely. This isn't Euripides, but it's going to be part of Seneca's, what he's trying to say. Okay, go ahead.
I shall try. Now go inside and see to what the children need today.
Back to the tutor, worried. Medea throws out her arms toward the two boys.
My sons, you will have a city and a home.
And she
far from-
loves her sons.
I shall be left
to love her
lonely,
sons.
and you will live without your mother always. For I must go in exile to another land, never have my joy in you. Or see your bright young progress, never deck your brides, your marriage beds, or light your radiant to your wedding day.
The boys are now in her arms.
Oh, what a blight my ruthlessness has been. How useless, little ones, my nursing all your growing up.
What a blight. So what does she say? What a blight my ruthlessness has been, right? Has been ruthless. And she's been ruthless for Jason, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and here she is. And she's talking about leaving and leaving them behind, right?
Yeah.
This is her plan now. She's not thinking that she's going to kill them. She's saying, I'm going to leave, right?
Oh.
Go ahead.
How useless all the cares endured, the wearying solicitudes, the shooting agony of giving you your lives, and now how miserably have dwindled my innumerable dreams of you. Your loving comfort when I'm old, your own hands dressing me when I am dead, passing every person might desire. Such sweet fancy vanishes, and wrenched from you instead, I shall drag my sad life out alone.
She cups their faces in her hands in turn.
Your own dear eyes shall miss forever your poor mother's face, your way of life and hers utterly apart. O children, do you let those eyes now stare their fill, and you last smiles linger to the last?
She turns to the chorus, panting.
Oh, what shall I do? My heart dissolves when I gaze into their bright irises. No, I cannot do it. Goodbye to my determination. I shall take my boys away with me. Why damage them in trying to hurt their father and only hurt myself twice over? No, I cannot. Goodbye to my decisions.
She's an ate. And we're feeling pity and we're feeling fear as the audience. What is she going to do? We kind of know if we're Greeks that she's going to kill them, right? It's not about that. It's not really about the suspense because we all know the story and we've heard it too from the chorus, and it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's like, what is going on in her character? What is going on? What is the choice that she's making? She is in this place of ate, right? So a pause, right? Then she suddenly breaks away from the boys.
What? What undermines me now? Do I really mean to let my enemies go, to laugh at me? Steel yourself, Medeas. Away with this cowardice, these arguments that melt.
Steel yourself with Medea, right? Mm-hmm. Shakespeare's going to do this with Lady Macbeth, right? Take away my womanly thing, right? I'm going to say, okay, now this is Lady Macbeth, Medea, Clytemnestra, these characters are kind of linked. So she says, okay, then she just says no. Whether, it's her pride, whatever it is, she can't do this. It's a reversal. It's another reversal. It's like, okay, she's going to go back. Okay, no, I'll take her with me. No, I'm not going to do it. She goes back and forth. Okay.
Go, boys, into the house.
She turns to the chorus grimly.
Anyone whose conscience will not let him stay, let him look to it. Avoid my sacrifice. This hand of mine shall never falter.
Another spasm of emotion grips her, and she runs to the boys as they reach the door.
No, stop me, my heart. We must not do this thing. Let them go. That's someone else. Is that?
No.
Let them go, you stricken woman.
She's talking to herself.
Yeah, right. Let them go, you stricken woman. Spare your sons. Let them live with you in Athens. They will be your joy. Ah, not by all the haunting spirits of the underworld shall I leave my children for my enemies to trample down. No, never.
Right. So it's now like, if I leave them here, right, it's like, what lives are they really going to have?
But,
biracial,
yeah.
according to the Greeks, right? So they're not going to fit in. They're bastards, illegitimate. His illegitimate, children, according to the Greeks. They're going to be lucky to be servants in because, like, the bride says, "Oh, aren't they so cute? Oh yeah, aren't they cute little, exotic children? I'll have them in my house. They can fetch my slippers, right?" So she's saying, "Really, this is what the life I want for my children?" Okay.
But they have to die. The whole thing is settled anyway. Yes, the diadem is on her head. The royal bride at this moment rots, dying in her gown. I know it.
She turns to the chorus as if to explain her second impulsive embrace.
You see, the path I have to tread is unutterably sad, but the one I set these children on is sadder still. Therefore, I desire to speak with them. Give me your right hand to kiss, each of you, my little ones. Give them to your mother. How adorable, this hand and these lips, how very much adored. And this face and form of childhood's ingenious nobility, how I bless you both, not here, beyond. Every blessing here your father has despoiled. So sweet, the mere touch of you, the bloom of children's skin, so soft, their breath, a perfect balm.
Gently releasing them, then almost savagely turning her back.
Go.
The Athenian audience right now is like, it's like, really? It's like, Okay.
Go, I cannot look at you. I am in an agony and loss.
The two boys weeping hurry into the house.
The evil that I do I understand full well, but a passion drives me greater than my will. Passion is the curse of man. It wreaks the greatest ill.
Yeah, I'm not going to read that.
So often before have I gone toward concepts far too tenuous, and come upon questions far too deep for the race of woman to try to unravel. Nevertheless, even we women have a muse of our own that ushers us in, though alas, not at all, to the world of wisdom. Perhaps you might find it 1 in 1,000. It serves to inspire the talent of ladies, and makes me able now to proclaim that people without the function of parent are happier than begetters of offspring. The childless man who has
This
no
is the
way-
chorus, by the way. This is the chorus saying this. Yeah.
Oh.
That's okay.
Sorry,
Keep
keep
reading
going.
it. No, keep
The
reading it.
childless man has no way of telling whether he misses a curse or a blessing. Nevertheless, the childless person certainly misses many a burden. I mark how the man with children growing sweetly at home is worn with worry. How to make sure they are properly fed, how to leave them a livelihood, and then after all to be in the dark. Were all the worries worth it or not? Were they a worthy or worthless lot? But now tell me, of the worst and saddest trait of all, suppose the children have quite a good life, reach their teenhood honest and fine. What if a fate like death, the cruel, carries them downward body and soul? What is the use of it after all? On top of all those other ones, the gods let loose this grief as well, just for the joy of having sons.
So what Roche says there is sort of little analysis of what this is. Each chorus has a purpose to it. He says, if there can be a feminine philosophy of parenthood, is its honest judgment likely to be that children are worth it after all? It's kind of like, what this sort of philosophical thing is being said. So what time is it? Are we time for a break? 1:56. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So let's take a break, and then let's come back and discuss contrast with Seneca.